Chapter 15. Although I was with Mr. Gurdjieff constantly during my 3-day leave in Paris, he did not refer to my condition or illness at the time of my arrival. He kept me with him alone after the dinners and suppers, at which there were always many guests, and when he did talk to me privately, it was about the problems of his students or about his difficulties with them. He told me that it would have been interesting for me to have been in Paris at the time, that he had suggested to a number of his students that the war and its aftermath had provided a proper climate in which to learn the importance of living in the present. He said that mostly because of our habits and preconceptions, it was very difficult for people to understand what was meant by living in the present. Too many people would interpret this as an excuse for casting caution aside and would live dangerously, without thought for the future. What he meant by living now was to expend all one's energy on living completely at the moment, experiencing life as fully as possible in the consciousness that this moment, this now, will never exist again. To many people this seemed to mean living fully in the sense of staying awake too long, drinking too much, or adopting an attitude of eat, drink, and be merry, for tomorrow we shall die, which was not what he intended. It was true, he said, that in order to live completely in the moment, it was necessary to be aware of the inevitability of one's own possibly imminent death. However, such awareness was not to be taken as an injunction to experience as much as possible or to overdo as much as possible while one was alive, but rather to be conscious of what one was doing and to try to occupy oneself properly, in such a way that one's experience would contribute to one's growth. While he would not define proper activities clearly, one had to discover proper and profitable experience and activity for oneself. He did advise exercises that would help an individual to concentrate on conscious activity. Almost all such exercises were, in one way or another, a form of learning something more about oneself. For example, a common exercise was to make a daily program of activity for oneself, and to be able to foresee and allow time for inevitable interruptions or distractions, and, especially, to plan a proper amount of work and play. For a given period of time, he said that there was often value in overreaching, doing more than one could, but that one could not overextend one's energies and capacities consciously until one had learned, through such an exercise, just how much available energy, how large a capacity, and how much available concentration one had that was ready for use. He said that any man, in a sense, had limitless energy, but that such energy was not available to him if regular habits acquired from infancy did not permit its expenditure, habits of sleep, need for food, etc. Almost everyone was unconsciously trained not to use all his energy. Given such training, it was impossible suddenly to begin to use it. In performing an exercise such as programming one's activities, it was possible to find out a great deal about self. Usually, an individual would try to do too much, but this was not always a bad result, because sometimes one could do too much without bad results and could learn A, that the planning was not accurate, and B, that they did have more energy than they had realized. In the beginning, however, the purpose of this exercise was to be accurate and to plan exactly. Failing to do exactly what was planned, or doing too much, were both incorrect, and either underdoing or overdoing was to be punished. I asked him what kind of punishment, and he said that the punishment should fit the crime, and that the very selection of a fitting punishment was in itself an exercise. It was important particularly not to over-punish oneself. As to living in the present, or living now, Gurdjieff said that if I could tell myself honestly that during a given period of time, whatever I happened to be doing, I at no time thought of anything other than what I was doing, I would at least have experienced the feeling of concentration and total involvement in the moment. He said that for young people before they were contaminated, a sexual experience could be used as a good example of living in the moment, being totally involved, but he added that as one grew up in the ordinary way, even sex seemed to be as compulsive and totally absorbing, and no longer commanded all one's energies and attention. Also, he made it very clear that he was using the example of sex only to describe the approximation of total preoccupation in the moment. Sexually, the involvement was unconscious. In life, it was necessary to achieve a similar degree of concentration and absorption in the moment, purposely and consciously. As I say, he did not speak of these things in relation to me, particularly or personally, at the time, but when I asked him if he thought I should do any of these exercises, he merely smiled and said that when a man was in a vegetable garden, he would eat vegetables for a number of reasons, because he was hungry, because he was greedy, or because he was attracted to the vegetables for some other reason. It depended on the man and his need or desire for vegetables. The vegetables, on the other hand, if eaten, would always nourish the eater, even to the point of making him ill if he did not know when to stop.